Speaking of baseball, how about them Cardinals? What do we got?
Well, I'm hearing, which is me saying I'm reading.
Sure.
Just to be honest with you, if it's not in season, I'm not like trying to dig because it's not really. Bally's is not on the air right now. If I had to do a report, I'd be digging. But it does seem like, based on John Mazalok's comments on KMOX on a segment on Sunday, that they haven't ruled out acquiring additional starting pitching, which I think is the smart, prudent thing to do. You can say what they have right now with the additions of the three guys they signed early on and say it's not enough. Maybe it's not. I'm not even defending that, even though I think they probably are fine. But they don't have enough because guys get hurt. So to me, the main complaint, which is legitimate, is they don't have enough starting pitching. You have 8 starters at spring training. You go, we're good. You're not good because you're going to be down to 4, 3 at some point because guys get hurt. And if you have guys in that 35-year-old range, tend to come up with more minor things that sideline them too. So I really wish they would go out and get another starter.
Yeah, I can't really change my opinion because before the winter started, I did say I wanted the Cardinals to get 2 starters better than Miles Mikolas, and I don't think they have achieved that. That said, I don't think it's the worst offseason ever. I'd give them a solid B grade somewhere in there. I do think they should have. The signing of Gray is great, and I thought they were going to trade for somebody who was also pretty good with some upside. I wanted one. I'm repeating myself. I wanted one of the Lance Lynn bucket. I feel like they got 2 of those guys with Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson. However, I don't think this means the Cardinals are going to be bad and not going to make the playoffs. I do think this gets into a lot of what happened last year, in my opinion. And we talk about this a lot. We kind of relitigate why the Cardinals were bad. I don't think a lot of people thought the 2023 Cardinals were a playoff team on paper when they entered the season. I thought they would make the playoffs based on the same way they did the previous 2 years, which was get to the trade deadline at 500, add the pitching. Now, what happened last year was you had a disaster. They were so bad, they got to the deadline, it didn't make sense to add. It absolutely made sense to sell, and so they go from 10 below to 20 below. Like, I don't think the Cardinals were as bad as 90 losses last year because clearly, if they keep Montgomery, they keep Flaherty. I mean, the end of the year, their roster was AAA.
Absolutely.
So and by the way, that's what you're supposed to do. We joke about tanking. That's what you should do. Once you've given up on the season, be bad, try to get a good draft pick, which didn't really work out, but at least make that attempt.
Also, get a look at some of your younger players so you know
Right.
what direction you're headed. But I disagree because I think most people, you could say Central's weak and they weren't built to win a World Series. That's fine. But most people thought they were a playoff team.
But that's not what I'm saying.
You could say most people thought they would add before the deadline because they'd be in position for the playoffs. But on paper, to start the season, most people, and you can go back and look at predictions,
No, that's not what I'm
most
saying.
people thought they were
good
enough to be a
But
playoff.
what we're talking about is why did you think they're a playoff team? Everybody thought the starting rotation needed help. But everybody saw what the Cardinals did the previous 2 years. I don't think anybody thought the Cardinals were going to be so bad early that they'd be in a position to not add at the deadline. The Cardinals the previous 2 years were exactly the same. They were 500 at the deadline. They added Happ and Lester and then Quintana and Montgomery to get to the playoffs. That's what I thought the blueprint would be last year as well. Nobody said they had enough starting pitching. And I think we could see a similar deal this year. Let's be honest. If you have a bunch of pitchers who are 35, 1 or 2 of them are probably going to be hurt or not pitch well. I think we'll be in the same spot this year. I hope the Cardinals are about 500 at the deadline and they add some pitching to get to the playoffs. That's how I see it happening again.
So, yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
I didn't dispute that at all, but most people thought they were all I'm saying is most people thought they were a playoff team. And I think there were other things on the team that didn't evolve. For example, I thought they'd be a really good offensive team, and I thought they'd play good defense, and there were stretches when there was none of that. It was like a snowball rolling downhill that got them to the point where they were sellers, not buyers.
And maybe this is semantics again, but I'm talking
Probably.
about we thought they were a playoff organization, meaning the Cardinals will do what they always do. If they need help, they'll add it. They'll get to the playoffs.
All right, that is semantics. I'm saying most people, like I remember most people outside of what's that thing that always kills them? The
Pacoda.
They nailed it, but they always hate the Cardinals. But most people, experts, people not connected to the team, non-rights holders, had them winning the Central.
I know, but my point is, look at what happened the previous 2 years.
No, I understand.
We all, me included, the last 3 years, we all said the Cardinals are a playoff team. The Cardinals are going to win whatever we chose, 88 to 92. They're going to probably win the Central. If they don't, they're going to get a wild card spot. We said that in 21. We said that in 22. We said that in 23. And 21 and 22, they actually weren't a playoff team on paper. They had to add pitching to become a playoff team in 21 and 22. That's how they – so we all said they're a playoff team. They weren't. They had to add significant – they had to replace 40% of their starting rotation 2 years in a row to get to the playoffs.
When they added Happen Lester, and again, this is recapping. This is redundant, but I thought they were waving the white flag. I had no idea those guys would be as good as they were, and they were. All I'm saying is that's what we thought at the start, and here's where we have common ground to agree. Everyone also thought the starting rotation was a weak point.
Did we ever get to the bottom of, like, the Wilson Contreras ordeal and the lack of, his ability to game plan? And then you go into the season without Mike Maddox. You bring in Dusty Blake. You lose Yadier Molina. You don't have the heroics of what Pujols did in the second half, which was unbelievable.
Best player in baseball second half. Most important player in the second half.
But have they done, like I've heard them say, like, well, we've been working with Contreras in the offseason more. Have they done enough to, like, address that? Because that seems like that was a huge issue a year ago.
So here's what Miles Michaelis, and maybe he's just covering for a teammate, on my YouTube channel. But he said Wilson took a lot of shrapnel for the starting rotation. This is Miles Michaelis, who might have been one of those guys behind the scenes saying, we need more out of this guy. He said Contreras got better and won guys over with the amount of work he put in. But he said after the initial thing, he said Contreras took the shrapnel for the starting rotation. He said because we didn't pitch well. And he took a lot of the bullets in the aftermath of that and didn't complain about it because he's a good teammate. I know they're working with him. You wonder if bringing back Yadi in whatever role that's going to be, because to be honest, I don't think the Cardinals know exactly what that is. Certainly will help Contreras. If I'm the Cardinals, I want Yadi with Contreras as much as he possibly can because he's the guy. I never bought in to you're going to see him in the outfield. They spent money. He's a good bat. You don't usually have good bats behind the plate. Make this guy better. And to be honest, in the minor league system, the guys that they have, like Herrera's a good player. I like him. Kisner was a good player. I liked him too. Neither guys were like defensive standouts anyway. So you got to work with Contreras.
Yeah, I just think, whoa.
Hey, now.
That was really bad. Yeah, I had a good day yesterday on that. I just think with Contreras, Nate, I think you bring up a great point because, look, I hope he does well. It's also year 8. At some point, what's the line? A tiger doesn't change his stripes. Like, can you make him 5% better as a defensive catcher? Can you make him 10% better? Sure. I think you can work on those things. But at the end of the day, he's a bat-first catcher. So I wonder how much he's going to get better. And we asked John Mozeliak about this, about Herrera, because I think that's a huge part of this, of their strategy to let a Kisner go. Kisner was your typical 50-game, 55-game backup. And I asked Mozeliak about this, and he said, well, we don't want Herrera to be a 40-game guy. But he also said Herrera could be somebody who could DH. So we can all speculate about Wilson Contreras. I think it'll be very interesting to see if Herrera hits. It'll be interesting to see how much Herrera plays, because I think that will really tell how do you feel about Wilson Contreras as a catcher defensively. If Herrera's given you good production at the plate, does it become a timeshare? Does it become half and half? And then Contreras catches 80 and DH is 40. I think that'll be very interesting to watch.
The thing about Herrera is he, during the offseason before last year, totally renovated his swing. If you ever saw the way he hit before and the way he did last year, and also change things mechanically as a catcher. I think a lot depends on how much work he can put in to be a better defensive catcher, because I think he's going to hit a little bit. I think he's going to be a good bat to have. But is he going to be a defensive upgrade from Contreras? I think that remains to be seen. I agree. You're not going to turn yourself into a Gold Glove catcher overnight, but I do think there's certainly improvements you can make, and I think that remains to be seen what they get defensively from Contreras and from Herrera.
When they traded for Herrera, remind me, was he offensive or defensive guy? Like, what his asset?
He's never his minor league analytics, and I looked this up, I think last year at some point. I don't remember, are not any better than what Kisner's were.
Okay,
like they were all in the same range. Kisner wasn't a great defensive catcher. Worked hard, called a good game, which is a big part of it too. I don't think they're blessed with great analytics on the defensive side of things from their catching core, but they'll hit, and depends how much you. I mean, Contreras been a catcher his career, and teams have, the Cubs live with what he did. Can he get better? I think he can.
One of the elements when they signed Lynn and Gibson, I'm sure you guys saw it, like with Michaelis too, they've given up 3 of the top 5 most allowed hits last year. And so defensively, is this still a team that you look at and go, boy, I mean, we really trust where we're playing our infielders and outfielders to go catch the ball? And, are they fundamentally sound enough to have 3 pitchers in their starting rotation that are going to give up close to 200 hits? I think that's up for
and
debate.
No shift.
Yeah, and
no
shift.
extreme shift.
So I think a lot depends on how you feel about Mason Wynn, because I think he's going to be your shortstop. I think he should be your shortstop. I think that guy is going to be a great defensive player. The range he has, look, there's some growing pains for a young guy being thrown into it. Certainly didn't hit. I like what I saw from Wynn. I think they'll be good defensive. I mean, they kept the guys at the corners. Walker has to be better in the outfield. I think they're pretty sound defensively if you have Newt or Tommy. Tommy doesn't have a great arm, but both guys are pretty good defensively. I don't know about Gold Glove or anything. They should be good enough defensively. And guys like Lynn and Gibson, Lynn had a bad year. Gibson wasn't really good either, but they pitched a lot of innings, which obviously adds that hit total up there. Will they be better? I don't know, because they put a lot of eggs into that basket.
I think, too, when you look at the Cardinals when they had a really good defense a couple years ago, and you did have the shift, but, I know Tommy Edman is a good defensive center fielder. I still don't like him playing center field. I just don't. And I know that Harrison Bader couldn't stay on the field, and if he wasn't going to sign here, and look, he's still looking for a deal, so it wasn't like he's this all-star of the future. But I just think there's something.
Great defensive center field.
I know, but I'm saying, I'm about to compliment him. I think there is something to be said that if you can just have that defensive center fielder and that defensive shortstop, everything else falls into place. And I just love Tommy Edman as your second baseman, as your Gold Glove second baseman. I understand that right now, Andy Van Slyke was the first person to say this that I heard. He's like, dude, he's your best center fielder. He was saying that early when he started playing center field. But that's also more about who else you have to play center field, right? I mean, you wouldn't say that when Harrison Bader is here. Tommy Edman is a gamer. I love the dude. I would feel comfortable with him at any position. He's just a baseball player, but I don't love him playing center field. The arm is an issue. I also think you're taking a position of strength. We love Nolan Gorman's bat, but come on. He's not a great second baseman. He's okay. He makes some nice plays, but I also think you're taking your Gold Glove second baseman in Tommy Edman and you're moving him to center field where maybe he's your best option, but man, he's a Gold Glover at second base. You're just kind of moving these pieces. That's why I agree. Mason Wynn, if Mason Wynn is a really good defensive shortstop, I think that solves a lot of problems.
What did you see? Do you think he can be?
Oh, I mean, he's absolutely toolsy elite from a speed and arm standpoint. So if he catches the ball, I find it hard to believe that Mason Wynn will not be above average shortstop in the majors. I think hitting is going to be the issue, but I mean, how could he be a bad shortstop? He's athletic through the roof, and his arm strength he probably has the best arm of any infielder in baseball.
So I said there were 4 guys that I would not trade during the offseason. I would not trade Goldie. I would not trade Arenado because you have those guys and they're elite. Now, they didn't have great seasons last year. I understand their age is up there, but you know what you're getting. You're getting great defense from those guys. And I would not trade Walker because of his upside or Wynn. And I was surprised people blew back on the Wynn thing. To me, what I saw from Wynn, what he hit, 170 something.
170.
He always struggled at every level he advanced. Then it kicked in, and he was a monster. I just look at Mason Wynn, and I think this guy's an all-star. Now, I don't know that for certain. Do you disagree?
I just know that in spring training last year, he was, I think you could say he was pole to pole the best player in spring. Even though Jordan Walker had that amazing first 3 weeks, he went through a little bit of a dip. But Wynn, I was so impressed because everything that we had read and heard was like, well, he could be overmatched. I mean, he came up, he was playing with confidence. He was hitting the ball to gaps, and you see his speed. I like Mason Wynn. The problem is that I think we've been burnt by some of these prospects who have been so highly touted, and then they come up and they sort of sizzle out, and they've hit 220 or 230, and they don't necessarily reach that ceiling that I think a lot of people thought they had. Carlson is a prime example of that.
When I think of the tools, though, and who knows, I thought Carlson would be dealt, but Mason Wynn is faster than like his tools are better than Dylan Carlson on paper. That's why I hadn't seen someone like Mason Wynn come up through the Cardinals organization since I've been here. A Mason Wynn type, a guy who you look at all the boxes, for the tools, is at the top of it. And Carlson he's another guy that injuries have really slowed him. Who knows if he can stay on the field? Same thing that bit Tyler O'Neill.
I feel like Carlson's getting to the point, too, where we're approaching the Tyler O'Neill. Again, Harrison Bader was more injury, but I feel like we're going to get to the point where, okay, now he has no more trade value. And that's where he is now. I guess you could still sell a team on his upside and control. There's the difference. Tyler O'Neill had 1 year, and you knew he wasn't going to sign here. I just look at Dylan Carlson, and I think this is now being discussed more, is he has the same body he had when he started. And I do think if you're an outfielder, you got to have some power. And I just see a guy who still looks like the 15-homer guy at his best and not the 25-homer guy. And I'm not saying Mason Wynn will ever be 25 homers because he's a shortstop. But to me, Mason Wynn is also that coiled athlete of just fast twitch muscle fiber who's going to hit doubles, triples. He maybe hits 15 homers. And, you said 230. I don't know what his batting average is going to be, but if he hits 25 doubles, 30 doubles, 10 triples, 12, and not even this year, but I'm saying a couple years from now, if he hits 12 to 15 home runs, if he can slug 450 and walk a little bit and be this amazing shortstop, also, he should be able to steal 50 bases in the big leagues. He's that fast. So I just think, to me, that's why I bring up that shortstop thing. I agree with you, Nate. We do overvalue our prospects. It's so hard to find the shortstop, just the shortstop. Like for years they were searching, Paul DeYoung, okay, but Paul DeYoung, he was okay. He made the All-Star game, but like that real good defensive shortstop, those guys do not just grow on trees.
I think he could be that. And
no,
then
I hope so, yeah.
The other question to this dynamic is Newt in center. Are you defensive?
Which I don't have a huge problem with. Like, actually, and the name we haven't even brought up is Donovan. Because, like, you start putting guys into spots, and then you always kind of forget about somebody. And I think that's because this lineup still has a little bit of redundancy between the Donovan and Edman, between the DH guy like Gorman and Walker.
Agreed.
And, like, you're still trying to figure out where everybody stacks up,
That's
but you want their bats in the lineup, but you still have, like, almost too many guys.
I agree. That's why I thought that redundancy, because I think a Donovan or an Edman have value, trade value. You have money, you have other pieces. I'm not saying you're going to get a great starter 1-for-1, but I honestly thought they would be involved, not because the Cardinals don't value them or like them, but there is a little redundancy. And one of the things that they had last year was trying to find enough at-bats for all those guys while trying to be the best defensive team you can. And I think that might be an issue again this year.
Yeah, that's why I'm surprised. I think we all figured at this point Tyler O'Neill was going to be gone. But I thought to kind of get rid of the clog, you needed to trade one more guy. And I think we always talk about the redundancy of Edman and Donovan. They're different players, but there's kind of some redundancy of Donovan and Gorman too. Now, Gorman has the elite power, but it's also about, like, I love having the one super utility guy. I feel like the Cardinals have two.
Right. That's
Now,
the redundant.
Right. If Edman, though, if you just say Edman's our 150-game second baseman, then I feel like you could move either Donovan or Gorman. And I know they're not exactly the same player, but I wish they'd try Gorman in corner outfield. Honestly. And Gorman can take both Arenado and Goldie off their feet because he can play corner infield. I mean, he came up as a third baseman. Donovan can play all those positions. But, I mean, I think if you're athletic enough to play second base, as Nolan Gorman is, you could play corner outfield.
Maybe.
You could play corner infield. Like, he could also be a super utility guy if you don't love him at second.
So if you're trying to put the best defensive team you can out there, I think the one position you could put someone who's a good athlete in there and still be fine is second base. I don't know why, but, like, I think Gorman would be fine, and you can still be a really good defensive team with Gorman at second. The one thing that scares me about Gorman, because I love his bat, and I think he's going to continue to mash. He's 23 years old, and he still has chronic back issues.
back.
Yeah.
That is a huge issue.
Chronic back issues.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a problem. That's why, the late Rick Hummel, early on in Gorman's career, he actually predicted that over time, Gorman would actually transition to first base because he's got the power. I mean,
and while I wanted to hold on to Goldie, and if they're talking extension now, they're going to hold on to Goldie, that first base position without Goldie there would be a great option for a couple of guys on the roster. That's why there's, like you said, clogs, little tiny clogs. You could probably work through it, but again, to put your best offensive team and best defensive, it's kind of a fluid thing. And the truth is, at least my opinion, your best defense is when you're kind of running the same guys out there every day. Then you get into more of a routine. If you're mix and matching too often, I do think eventually your defense probably isn't going to gel the way you want it to.
But I just think that's why trading Goldschmidt makes too much sense. And I think they're already late to doing this, but because I don't think the Cardinals are going to win the World Series like next year. I don't think they're going to win it in 2 years. So if you're truly committed to growing these younger players and Gorman and Wynn and making sure that Walker gets every day at bats, I think you have to figure out a way then to unload a player like Goldschmidt to either replenish your farm system or get a pitcher in here that can be an ace, because I think Goldie could probably get you a younger guy who's right on the verge of making it to the big leagues.
If the Cardinals added, forget trading Goldie, but I'm just saying if they were able to add without messing with Goldie or Arenado or Walker or Wynn, but they were able to add another front of the rotation guy. I don't know about an ace, but
how about Cease?
A Cease type guy. Okay, that just,
he had one bad year, but he was amazing.
2 years ago, he was top. But what he finished, he was a finalist for AL Cy Young.
Would you say they're a World Series contender if they did that, or still no?
They're a lot closer.
I'm just curious where you are.
I just think if you go into a 5 or 7 game series and you got to go up against Wheeler and Nola, and you've got Gray and Michaelis, and you're just a guy short. You're an ace short, I think, of really scaring somebody. Because this lineup in a short series, now they haven't really proven they can do it, but you'd think, because you've seen it in other series, where that lineup can go off. Like, there are bats in that lineup that other teams don't want to face.
I agree with that.
But if you on paper don't go in with, here's our 1, here's our 2, I think it makes it really tough to win playoff series.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And that's why I can't change my whole opinion based on what they did, because the whole time I said you need to get 2 pitchers better than Miles Michaelis, and I don't feel like they've achieved that. So if they enter the playoffs, I will still not feel great about Michaelis being the 2, or Lynn, whoever ends up being, the second best pitcher, whoever that is. I will not feel real confident if they have to match up against the Wheeler and the Nola like they did a couple years ago. And that's why, as I thought more about it, even though you just kind of knew, even if it made sense to trade a Goldie, you just knew the Cardinals weren't going to, right? Because it just felt like an extension candidate the whole time. But as you said, Nate, what does it really matter? Does it really matter that much if you have Goldie and Arenado for the next 3 years if you don't win anything? And if your best ticket to get the elite starting pitching that most people think will actually take you to the World Series contender is getting rid of one of those guys who, by the way, is mid to upper 30s. If that's your best chance to acquire elite pitching, you have to look at that. So I agree. I think there's a very good chance the Cardinals do the same thing this year. Hopefully they win 90 games, but I think they're going to have a short playoff run unless at the deadline they really add or they go to some crazy bullpenning where they add a bunch of elite relievers, because I just think it's hard to march through the playoffs with Sonny Gray, Miles Michaelis, Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson. I think it's hard to win 3 series with those guys. It can happen. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it's very difficult.
Do you think they're going to add 2 relief pitchers still? I mean, like
I think at least one. I don't know who. The guys they brought in are arms with potential, but they're still question marks. I would have loved to see him bring in a guy who has a track record of pitching in leverage situations,
like a Josh Hader.
He's got a pretty good track record. Just to bolster. I don't know if it has to be of that level, but a guy and I'll get killed like if Cole were here out of a tantrum, but like a Joe Kelly guy who's done it on the big stage, who has pitched in leverage situations, who has swing and miss stuff. He was good at the end with the Dodgers. He's had arm issues. So I'm not even saying him, and he's back with the Dodgers. But that type, almost like a starter, not like a closer, but a 1A type closer. It doesn't have to be a hater. I'd be okay because I'm a Helsley guy. Now, I know he had health issues last year, but when he's healthy, and, yeah, he's not going to go 3 games in a row. He's going to tick some fans off. But when he's healthy and he's in a game to close it out, his stuff is as good as anyone in baseball. I mean, I'm talking about swing and miss stuff where he's going to throw strikes and he's going to get you to the end where you want to be. The question is, can he be healthy like some of the other players, and how often can you use him? That's why I would like another guy so you can have a dual end-of-the-game role. I like Gio, not in the 9th. I like what JoJo Romero did last year. I think they have pieces, but I think they're missing a big piece right now.
Why was Gio so inconsistent? I mean, it was either this guy was going out and putting up zeros or he was getting lit up. I mean, the home runs.
I didn't look this up, but it does seem if you use him in like the 7th or 8th, he's better. I just remember him
9th inning was a struggle.
Getting caught in the 9th. So put him in a situation where he has better results.
And I do think there's something to what John Mozeliak said about adding starters that give you innings. And I know it's very easy when you go, okay, we added Lynn and Kyle Gibson. They give you innings. What's the fan going to say? They're bad innings. Okay, 5 ERA innings. I get that. I mean, Kyle Gibson was okay. I do think Lance Lynn will be better. But there is something to getting, hopefully, into the 6th and finishing the 6th, and your bullpen should be better. Just by the fact, I mean, look at what Waino was giving you when he started. He was giving you 4. I mean, guys early, the Dakota Hudsons and Jake Woodfords of the world, what were they giving you? 3 1/3, 3 2/3. So even if Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, if their average start becomes close to a quality start, if their average is 5.8 innings at a 4.5 ERA, that means Gio gets a rest hopefully once a week, and he should be better. I do think there's something to, if your starters can give you more innings, your bullpen won't be taxed. How many times did we watch Ollie in the postgame? Well, Helsley was down, Gio was down, couldn't use him. We had 3 guys to go. And I think the guy we're not bringing up is, I mean, what if Zach Thompson, I'm not saying he needs to be Andrew Miller, but what if he could become like a really good bullpen multi-inning guy?
I like Zach Thompson.
You know?
I just wonder if I still think he could start. That's where I'm sort of.
That's why I didn't put him in there. So I'm a Zach Thompson guy. I was wrong about last year. He started off with 9. It might have been 9 like scoreless, but 9 really good bullpen appearances. Then he had 3 rough ones, and they sent him to go start. And the whole thing went, so he didn't even know what they were looking for him. He couldn't throw strikes at AAA. That's why I didn't bring him up for bullpen, because you got to have some depth in your starting rotation. I guarantee he'll go to spring training told to stretch out just in case, but he could be a piece. Liberatore was much better as a bullpen piece. They have pieces, and some of the new guys might be in the mix. I just worry about the late game leverage stuff. That's why I want to see another piece.
Isn't it amazing just league-wide starting pitching, how bad it is. I mean, it's just not a good era for starting pitching, and I think some of that is the way the game has moved, and you're trying to shorten games and have these great bullpens where guys come in and throw 100 miles an hour and you strike out. But, man, you to get somebody now with even close to a 3 ERA, it's a slim list of people.
And every team wants it, and that's why when Mo said we're getting 3 starters, you're thinking, how? In this market where there are not a lot of those guys out there, how are you going to accomplish that? And then looking back to last year, too, you talk about the importance of starting pitching. So their starting rotation was decimated early on. And then so the bullpen got destroyed early on. And that's, to me, when the snowball just started rolling downhill. Now, that's why I think they like a Kyle Gibson and a Lance Lynn, so much durability and innings. And Lance is not happy about last year. He doesn't like being chirped for so many home runs given up. He thinks he knows what the solution is. Do guys find solutions when they're 35, 36? Maybe.
It's happened before.
Yep.
I mean, Waino, to be fair, everyone thought that he was down for the count 5 years before it finally happened.
People wrote him off twice in his career, and he came back.
He wrote himself off in San Diego. He probably thought he was done.
Thought it was it, yeah.
I think, I know this isn't sexy to say, but I do think that in baseball, if you just get to the deadline, there are so many starters in the same way that the Cardinals were able to trade Flaherty and Montgomery. Now, I'm not saying they're going to bring back Flaherty, but let's be real. If the Tigers don't make the playoffs, Flaherty will be on the market again. Those types of pitchers, it could even be the Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson of another team that are that guy. You just need innings all of a sudden at the end of July. If the Cardinals are in the mix, they are not going to try to go 2 years without making the playoffs. It is pretty damn easy to add a starter and a reliever at the deadline and not give up that much. So that's what I think last year. I truly believe John Mozeliak did not think his rotation was good enough, but he thought it was good enough to get to the deadline to make it better like they had the previous 2 years. So to me, if the Cardinals, all they have to do is not be crap. They just need to be at least 500 to the deadline. And if something happens, Gibson or Lynn or Michaelis gets hurt, I think you'll be able to add enough to get you to the playoffs.
I also think, too, like when people are taking shots at Sonny Gray as not being the number one, I understand where they're coming from. But to me, if you're going to criticize that, I'm not worried about this year. I think he's going to be a front of the rotation guy this year. But at his age, on a 3-year deal, what are you going to get towards the end of the contract? That's where I think the criticism is more well-based.
Why is Monty not signed, do you think? Montgomery.
You think he's waiting? I wonder. Remember how at first everybody said the Yamamoto market is going to everybody's going to wait? Because Ohtani was a different deal. But then I think Nola's deal happened pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And then it seemed like there was some reaction with some of the Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson type pitchers, Kenta Maeda, and all that. So I wonder if whoever loses the sweepstakes for Yamamoto, it seems like every big market team is in, right? Red Sox, Mets,
Yankees,
still Dodgers. I wonder if Montgomery's thinking, well, if I wait for Yamamoto, whoever misses out on Yamamoto is probably going to throw me a huge number.
He could end up going back to the Yankees if they don't get Yamamoto. I've read a couple of things where he's connected to this team or that. I just remember at some point during the season, it wasn't going well, for the team. And I said, is there any chance that something can get done? And he said, too late. They had their chance.
And they probably could have got a nice. Remember, we were last year thinking, is that a 4-year deal? Now it's probably 7.
It's a big deal.
It might be more.
Yeah.
It honestly, I think entering this winter, we thought the Snells of the world, maybe 5 years, 125. Once Nola gets, what do you get? 7 years, 172. If you're Snell, we forgot to mention Snell. If you're Snell and Montgomery, I don't know how you settle for anything less than right around what Aaron Nola got. They're all essentially the same age. They're all about 30, 31-ish. So I feel like if Nola got that money, and let's remember, too, Nola has the bigger track record and postseason, but he had a bad year. Wasn't his ERA 4.7?
Yeah.
First half was terrible. The second half was, I think, a lot better.
If I'm a general manager, I want to see how a guy does in the postseason.
And Monty
was
holy,
a monster.
I mean, he was a catalyst.
Right? If I'm thinking I'm not paying this guy this much until I see it, well, you just saw it. That guy was money.
And you could tell he wanted the ball, you know? I mean, man, if you could get Monty back, even though it's not going to happen, he would certainly shore up the top end. You'd feel a lot more comfortable if you had Gray, Montgomery. See, now you're talking about a rotation that's got some guys that are workhorses in there. And I'll ride with that. But you're a guy short.
Oh, look, if you said we enter 2024 playoffs with either Sonny Gray or Jordan Montgomery, that's your 1 and 2, I'd be like, let's go. Let's roll.
Yeah,
it's just, I'm sorry, and it's a feel thing. It's a feel thing. And I felt this 2 years ago we talked about it on this show when they went up and when you knew it was the Phillies, even though the Cardinals were better that year and you had all the Pujols magic. The second you knew the Phillies could line up Wheeler and Nola, you go, oh, because you're a gambler. Gambling comes down to the starting pitching. I don't care where the game was at Busch Stadium. Do you feel better about Wheeler, Quintana, Michaelis, Nola? Like, as a gambler, who do you feel better about?
Oh, without
it's an
question,
easy,
the latter.
It isn't, and you might lose, but on paper, if you can roll out Wheeler, Nola, and if the Cardinals' second best guy is Michaelis, who we like, but he's more back end, I'm sorry, like you're going to lose that series more times than not.
Unless it's the Michaelis who, a few years ago had a really good season. Can he be that guy? Can Gibson be that? You don't know.
But in the playoffs, when like strikeouts play, I mean, a Wheeler or a Nola, you've seen them shove 7 innings, 9 Ks, whatever it is. You just
I
feel
agree.
a lot better.
You're talking about those two guys. I understand that. What about depth? Like, is that for the rotation? To me, that's a big concern because I anticipate someone getting hurt, maybe two. Who's the depth?
That's why I thought it was kind of interesting when they let both Woodford and Dakota Hudson be non-tendered. And it wasn't because, hey, we love those guys, but you need that. Those 8th and 9th guys are going to get a start. And I think we looked this up that I believe those guys combined pitched about 120 innings, something like that. So Dakota got 80 maybe, Woodford got 40. It's something, I think they combined for about 12 starts, something of that ilk. I don't remember. But that's like enough. You need those guys. So is that now McGreevy, Rom?
I forgot about Rom.
Who else?
Yeah.
I forgot about Rom.
Graceffo, is he going to be more of a reliever? That's another guy. You didn't see any of these minor league pitchers that we talked about. None of them really contributed.
How about Connor Thomas? This guy was all the talk in the world. He had a terrific Arizona Fall League and then didn't have a great spring training and didn't really do anything to warrant a call up to the big leagues.
Those minor league prospects, the pitching prospects, never really developed in the way we had anticipated they would. Right?
And Liberatore from a starting perspective.
Right. Like Hentz is the guy that everyone's going to be focused on now, but he's not ready. Maybe we see him at the end of the season. They're short.
So who would be – so right now, and when I brought up Zach Thompson, I think you can make the case that since you already sent Steven Matz to the bullpen, I'm sure he doesn't love that, but if he starts the year in the rotation and then he falters, okay, you can send him to the pen again. Maybe you flip a Zach Thompson. But is it fair to say right now Steven Matz is going to be in the rotation?
Yes, absolutely.
Zach Thompson is probably your 6. And then you got to see what happens with what? Doesn't it feel like Liberatore, they should focus on him being a bullpen guy?
Last I spoke to people last year, they really liked him in the bullpen because he could focus on the things he does best, and he's a little more aggressive in those situations. So I think he's a bullpen guy. So it's going to be Thompson, Rom, and someone else.
McGreevy, maybe.
Like I would assume, unless someone catches fire at spring training.
That feels light. And that's why even though Dakota Hudson and Jake Woodford, you didn't love them, but, again, you're just going to need 5 starts from somebody like that. Somebody's going to get hurt, double headers, innings, usage.
That's why they've still got to they have to make moves. Like, I just don't think they can be done yet. And the market is really dragging on. I mean, this whole, Ohtani kind of held things up with his contract. The Yamamoto stuff is still dragging on. But I think once that these big dominoes begin to fall, you're going to start to see some of the smaller chips sign. And hopefully the Cardinals are involved in that.
Where are you guys on Burleson? I love him because he's good for media.
There's a name we didn't.
I forgot to even mention
I
him.
know.
So that's why I bring it up. So, I mean, he's a guy, you look at his minor league numbers, he mashes. I love that he doesn't look like your prototypical athlete. But I think that guy hits. He hits everything hard. I know the numbers weren't great. But if you look at it, the percentage of balls he hits hard, really good. I think he could be a player. I'm very comfortable with him being a piece for that ball club.
That's why they should trade Carlson, I think. I feel better about Burleson as the fourth outfielder than Carlson. Maybe it's because my expectations are too high of Carlson, because he feels like he should be a starter.
Absolutely.
He feels like he's wasted as a fourth outfielder. And I say this with all due respect, but Alec Burleson on a good team feels like a really good fourth outfielder that gives you power, plays a couple different positions, a little DH, a little pinch hit.
That's why I was like redundancy. Like they're not the same player, but in terms of how you have to utilize your at bats for all your position players, you got Carlson and Burleson. You know, like that's why I thought Carlson was going to be traded.
And I'm not trying to change the subject, but as we were talking about pitching, I hadn't really thought about this until now, but it happened a week ago. We've always heard about deferred money, right? And you always heard dudes get a little bit here and there, whatever it is. But I wonder if Ohtani's contract, I mean, it just happened. Does that now change the way all contracts are done, including right now? If you're Yamamoto, if you're Snell or Montgomery, why wouldn't you want the same thing? I understand they're not Ohtani. That's not what I'm saying. But if you think, hey, I can get an extra $50 million of a total number if I defer the crap out of that, why wouldn't you do that? I wonder if all of the deals are being in a way redone. Wouldn't you, like if somebody said to Monty, we'll give you a NOLA deal, 7 years, 172 right now, or we'll give you some crazy deferment where it ends up being you get $230 million, but you get half of it 10 years from now. Wouldn't you do that?
I think it'll be an impact. But, I mean, the difference, A, you're talking about Los Angeles. You're talking about California, where the tax rates on that kind of money are insane. Okay? It's not that way in every city or in every state. And then Ohtani has $40 million a year in money outside of what he makes from playing baseball with his marketing deals. Not everyone has that. So if you're a guy who's made a few million in baseball, now it's your chance for a big payday. You want some of that cash now.
Okay, and I'm not saying...
But I'm saying it will have an impact, but I think it's case by case.
And I'm not saying they do... Ohtani is a unicorn in so many ways. He can take $2 million, and like you said, he's making 40 off the field. He can get his 680 down the road. But even what Sonny Gray did in a way, I mean, he deferred the crap out of most of that for a couple years. So he gets what, 10,
25,
15,
35.
25 with the... And then there's an option to get the 35, whatever it is. So I don't know. I just wonder because... I would take, like, if you give me half my money now, but you're going to give me more total value. And that's the thing. It helps the teams. If you can know I don't have to pay that money for 10 years, you can invest that money and make 40% of it off the interest, off a bond. You know, so like it helps the teams. It helps the Dodgers. The Dodgers will probably win, hopefully you'd think, a World Series or two more by not having to pay Ohtani until 2034, whenever it is.
And then they sell the team.
I don't think those contracts. I think that is not sustainable. I don't think a player who signs a $700 million contract and only takes $20 million of it through his playing career. That something's not right there.
It doesn't seem fair.
It really doesn't.
No, it doesn't. But it's within the rules. Maybe the rules have to change. But if you're Ohtani, and I'm sure you've had the best tax people in the world look at that. As I brought up, I don't know the answer, but. So now you're going to make all that money when you're done playing. You go
get
back
out
to
of California.
Get out of California. Go back to Japan, different country. Maybe there's some sort of tax buffer if you move back. I don't know.
But there was a lot out. Like the conspiracy was that the Dodgers were doing this to stay underneath the luxury tax. But that's not really. I was trying to read this article on MLB Trade Rumors that was breaking it all down. Like the value of the contract still gets put into like the overall
CBT.
payroll. Yeah.
I think isn't it like $43 million?
Yeah, it's something like $44 million.
Yeah. So they're not getting the 2 number, but they're not getting the 70 number.
Right.
But even if it's 43, 44, I read something similar. They're still essentially saving $27 million per year, which doesn't really seem fair. It seems like, again, you're finding a loophole. I understand. It's not really the spirit of the rule of why they created the competitive balance tax. But you know what? We started to see this happen last year. They started giving these dudes, remember, these 13-year contracts. And so who was the Xander Bogaerts? Well, they said, well, okay, we'll pay you till you're 42. We don't really care that you're probably going to retire, but we got that AAV down. So our AAV now is 26 instead of 32 because we're throwing a bunch of years on the end. That's all to skirt that competitive balance tax.
And that's nothing new. Bonilla did it. Al Raboski did it when he signed with the Braves. He was still getting paid. Maybe he still is. So it is nothing new. I think the best part of, we talked about it yesterday, if I'm a president of baseball operations and I can oversee the signing of an Ohtani and I get him to put in the contract that if I get fired, he can opt out, how great is that? I would there's no way they're getting rid of the baseball ops guy in Los Angeles with the Dodgers, because that means the big fish can swim away. So I'd be wearing cargo shorts into the office.
Imagine the owner signing off on that. Like, if I fire my top guy, this guy gets to go too?
It's unbelievable to have that. Can you
job
imagine?
Security,
You're untouchable. You're bulletproof.
Friedman must be, you've heard that everybody thinks he's the best. He must be, because Joe Madden did the same thing. He tied himself to Friedman with the Rays.
Right.
And that's how he was
out.
able to get out. And now you got guys 10 years later tying him to the Dodgers. So he must be really good. People must really, really like working with him.
But you can, hey, Shohei, look, we're going to give you the money. We're going to defer it. You can take that whole ball of cash with you at the end. You can do anything you want, okay? But just put me in there. Just put me in your contract.
Except here's what happens. Let's be honest. 5 years from now, Shohei probably has 5 really good offensive seasons. He probably gets to a point where he can't pitch anymore. His elbow's going to fall off after his third Tommy John. So Friedman's going to get let go like 6 years from now, and Shohei's like, I'll still stay. I'm going to stay here since I'm now a $70 million DH. But he has the option.
Money. Would you have given? I mean, that's a lot of money for a guy who you really don't know what his future pitching career looks like.
No, but I will say this. I think they can make the money back in that market. I don't think it's a good fit for all markets. But, I mean, L.A., I think you can make your money back. I just look at him. Like, I honestly have to, is he real? Like, honestly, when you think about what he can do, even when you're watching video, you're like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. This is not supposed. You can't have a guy that good as a hitter and as a pitcher, right? I mean, it's hard to believe he's real.
He's a hell of a player, but he hasn't won. And when you outside, I guess, of the World Baseball Classic. But
that'll be fun to watch him in the playoffs, though, man.
It would. I mean, it was fun to watch him in the World Baseball Classic.
But how about the Angels having that much talent and so poorly managed, where you can't do anything? The amount of money spent.
If you were,
had Pujols too.
Anthony Rendon, not a great deal.
Not a great deal. How about the pitcher they got? Wilson,
C.J. Wilson back in the day. Yep.
Just bad. How about Rendon? Is that the biggest drop off after? Like you were talking earlier about, once you get paid,
he's horrible.
It's human nature to not be as hungry. He went from great, I mean unbelievable, to garbage.
Was he on the? I forget. Was he on the World Series team
for the Nationals? I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. And
God,
he signed the next. That was the off season.
That 1 year, he was freaking amazing.
Really good.
Like just the clutchest dude, driving in every big run.
But that's a cautionary tale. That's why if you're the Cardinals, you get a Lance Lynn.